The first time Nura Reddick saw the fire truck, it looked like a sleeping animal, red dulled to brick under a rind of dust, glass cloudy with spider silk, chrome pitted like old teeth. It sat half swallowed by sumac at the fence line of the county fairgrounds, just beyond the sign where someone had spray-painted shame on the wooden gates. Dawn hadn't burned the fog off yet, and the truck's silhouette, boxy cab, ladder rack, fat pump panel with its blind gauges, hovered in the pale as if the light wasn't sure it wanted to wake it. She killed the engine of her pickup and listened to the tin clinks of cooling metal. The fairgrounds were still except for starlings arguing in the rafters of the grandstand and a sheet of stray plastic snapping on the chain link. The county had gone broke 3 ways: mismanaged funds, 2 bad floods, and the fair had been cancelled for 3 years running. A man from the auction board had called Nura the night before, a favor. "There's an old pumper out here," he'd said, voice like gravel sifted through a chain. "Volunteer company left it behind when the station closed. Could be salvage for you. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you." She swung the gate with her hip and its side open, weeds combing her jeans. Up close, the truck wore its years like a coat of river silt, amber drips down the door seams, sun-chalked roof, decals half-peeled, cedar glass volunteer fire, block letters arcing above a blue heron with wings spread. The heron's eye was a pinprick of glossy paint that had somehow outlived everything else. "Even dead rigs keep their posture," her father used to say, a thing he believed about machines and people both. Nura ran her palm along the fender, feeling the shallow dimples of hail scars under the skin. "You're heavier than you look," she murmured. She could smell varnish and trapped rain, ghosts of calls, wet hose packed wrong, a century of half-washed smoke. The door handle stuck before giving with a throat-clearing groan. Inside, stale air puckered her tongue. Maps curled like molting snakes on the dash. A dog-eared field guide to hazardous materials slumped under the glove box, 1997 edition, the kind with color plates. Someone had left a beanie under the passenger seat. She turned it over. There was a patch hand-stitched on the knit, a blue heron again, this time with a copper-colored thread catching the light. Cedar Glass was the little river town east of here, a mile of storefronts and a rusting canning plant, the place where Nura had once picked up alternators on credit and delivered them in person to folks whose trucks had to run to keep their lives together. She knew the names of the volunteers there, the carpenter who worked nights, the school bus driver with a limp, the Burns sisters who could back a ladder truck down an alley blindfolded and never kiss a mirror. The county did what it did, and the volunteers did the rest. That was before the last flood chewed the warehouse district off its footings and the state cut its grant. The station went dark. The town carried on, quieter, as if speaking too loud would call down water again. The keys weren't in the ignition. She checked the visor on habit. Nothing but a receipt tucked in, oil change, 2012, odometer scribbled in pencil, 118,275. That would make it a 1980s Pierce, maybe a Spartan chassis. She leaned under the steering column and smiled. There, wired with all the faith of a parishioner, was a toggle switch and a length of lamp cord. Improvised ignition. Whoever mothballed her hadn't wanted to be fully parted. She slid out and walked the length of the truck. The pump panel's gauges wore foggy cataracts, needles frozen at nervy angles, discharge 2, 30 psi, tank level, 1/8. The caps on the steamer ports had seized, green halos of corrosion around their threads. On the rear step, the hose bed was cinched with rotten webbing, a mouse had turned a corner of it into a millet palace. Nura crouched and peered under the belly. Frame solid, leaf springs kissed with rust but not flaking. Good bones. The kind of bones that would sing if you gave them fuel and a purpose. She hauled the hood latch and lifted. Dust hoofed into the air with a smell like old cellars and coin jars. The diesel sat like a dark animal in a steel den, belts drooping like tired tongues. She checked for chew marks on the harness and found none. Oil, amber, thin, a little metal on the magnet if you squinted, coolant, present, not mud, fuel, likely varnish by now. She brought a battery from the shop and set it on the bumper. The cables had been taped up against weather. She unwrapped them and winced. Whoever did the last work had twisted copper like bread dough, bare bright coils singing "Arc Me." She rebuilt the ends from her pocket kit, the way she had since she was 16 and her father had set her to learn by feel with a dead mower and a pile of scrap. "Don't just look, listen," he'd told her, lifting her hands to the air like they had their own ears. The year he died he left her the shop and his debts and a yellow rag that still smelled like him, solvent and clove cigarettes. She kept the rag in a drawer she almost never opened, because sometimes grief was a thing you managed by letting it remain folded. The first try on the switch brought nothing but a tight click from the relay. The second gave her dash lights, a brittle glow under the cracked plastic lenses, and the little whine of the intake heater trying to remember how. "Come on," she said. She let the heater cycle twice, then thumbed the improvised starter. The truck coughed like an old smoker and fell quiet. She tried again. Cough, a swallow, a rattle that suggested a nest somewhere where nests shouldn't be, then laughter. Children, maybe, bright and startling as a handful of marbles poured down a tin roof. Noura let the engine switch go and stood very still. The laughter didn't come from the truck. It came from the fairground behind her where the poultry barns were dark. A blackbird burst from the doorway and shot across the gravel, scolding like a sheriff. She exhaled. "Armies of ghosts, Reddick," she said to herself. "And you without your coffee." On the third try the engine caught. Diesel goes from almost a yes with a peculiar triumph, a stagger that lands on both feet, then a baritone you can feel in your ribs. The whole truck shook awake, the steering wheel trembling like a nervous hand. Blue smoke poured from the exhaust and curled something wicked into the air. The pump engaged itself for a second, then decided it had imagined it. She laughed, and it sounded like a small victory coming up from a deep well. She checked the brake pressure and watched it build, slow but steady. The air buzzer whined and then cut off. She feathered the throttle and the old girl answered. "You and me," Noura said. 1 mile at a time. She hadn't meant to drive it. She had meant to note the VIN, ask permission, tow it later. But some machines are best rescued before anyone can tell you no. She eased out the clutch and the truck rolled. The tires had flat spots that thumped like a heartbeat. Weeds hissed under the axle as they cleared the sumac. On the road, the mirrors trembled and the sun pushed through the fog and flattened every color into something tender. In the side mirror she saw the blue heron on the door again, that impossible glossy eye looking forward. Her own eyes burned. She blinked and focused them on the lane as the fairgrounds drifted behind. The town woke slow. A woman in a robe at the gas station bent for the morning newspaper and stared, paper forgotten. 2 boys on BMX bikes slowed and rode parallel, grinning like they'd discovered a dinosaur moving down Main. Noura didn't lift her hand because the wheel had a play in it that demanded 2 hands and a promise. She shifted to third and listened to the differential complain like a gossip. At the stoplight the engine idled steady, real as a heartbeat. Her shop sat at the bend where the town slid back toward Fields, Reddick Repair, a single bay with a roof she'd patched twice and a painted sign she could never afford to repaint. The bay door was up. A customer had left a dented gray Cherokee in the gravel with a note tucked under the wiper, "Knocks on right turns." On the office window someone had taped a flyer for a missing person, one of the warehouse kids, dark eyes, the photo too crisp to be old. 2 weeks, the dates said. 2 weeks and the river hadn't offered him up. She put the truck in neutral and let it idle in front of the bay. The engine coughed, then settled again. She shut it down and the world rushed back, crows, a semi grumbling by on the highway, the metallic creak of the shop sign as it nodded in the morning breeze. Noura slid down from the cab and stood in the gravel looking at what she'd dragged home. Sun pulled the red up from its sleep, the kind of red you see in old barns and cast iron skillets. "You're not scrap," she said. "You're a story I need to hear." Inside the bay, she cleared space that wasn't there. A shelf of alternators became a floor stack, a milk crate of half-wrenches slid under the bench, a 5-gallon pail of mystery bolts tucked into the corner like a well-behaved dog. The fire truck nosed in with inches to spare, as if it had always known the way. The shop was suddenly too small and exactly right all at once. She started with the second battery in series, pulled it, checked it, replaced it with a reconditioned one from a school bus. She bled the fuel lines into a coffee can, watched fuel the color of old tea dribble and then run clear. She changed the oil with a practiced grace that made the heavy drain pan look like choreography. When the engine fired again, it fired clean, like it had remembered itself. By noon the sun had turned the parking lot into a griddle. Heat rose in sheets from the hood. She ate cold-boiled eggs standing up and wiped the yolk off her finger with the hem of her shirt. A familiar voice, Mrs. Voigt from the pharmacy, called from the doorway to the office, "Lord, child, is that a whole fire truck?" "It was sleeping at the fairgrounds," Nora said. "I woke it up." Mrs. Voigt stepped inside, lifting her skirt out of habit as if the floor might be wet. "Cedar glass," she read off the door. "My brother's boy used to run with them. That was before his back." Her face changed. "You heard about Paxton? The boy in the flyer?" Mrs. Voigt nodded. "His mama. She comes by every morning and just stands out there. I tell her not to stare at the paper so hard like she can will him back, but what else she got?" The air changed around the word mama. Nora felt it pass her ear like a moth. "I'll keep my eyes open," she said, though of course everyone was keeping their eyes open. The river took and kept and took again, sandbars and suns, depending on the day. After Mrs. Voigt left, Nora climbed onto the truck's rear step and pulled at the hard scabbed webbing that held the hose in. It flaked into her palm. She worked the knots free the way you untie something your own hands once tied 10 lives ago, and she found what she expected to find, a 50-foot section of hard suction hose, its polymer gone opaque, 2 lengths of 1 3/4 attack hose whose couplings had fused to the beds with corrosion. But tucked down between them, she found what she did not expect, a wooden panel screwed into the deck where no panel had reason to be. The wood wasn't factory. The grain lay crosswise, the screws were a kind you buy at a hardware store on a Saturday while your kid eats a pickle from the jar by the register. Someone had stained it with a color that tried to be cherry and failed. A smear of paint on the edge looked like it had been wiped with a thumb and driven anyway. Nora laid her fingers there and felt the rhythm of her own pulse come back to her. "Who hid you?" she said, and meant it the way you talk to a box in an attic where you're half afraid of the letters you know are inside. She fetched a driver and kneeled on the deck. The first screw budged, then squealed up out of the wood in a little prayer of rust. The second snapped its head off and left a fawn of steel. The third came slow, stubborn, the way county politics come when you push them. Under her knees, heat pooled through the denim. Sweat licked her spine. She smiled without meaning to, the way she had when she was little and her father had told her he had a trick for opening biscuit cans, bang them on the counter until they pop, and she had believed him until she tried it herself and learned about patience. The panel lifted sticky from its bed. Underneath, darkness. No hose tray. The space had been boxed in, sides and floor, a hidden compartment in the belly of a machine meant for saving lives. She sat back on her heels because sometimes your body knows before your head will let your mouth say it out loud. Hiding places are for 2 kinds of things you're proud of and things you're not. She reached her arm in. The air in the compartment was cool, a cellar under summer. Her fingers met the dry weave of canvas and the slick cool of polyethylene. She pulled up a bundle wrapped in an old turnout coat, blackened to dull satin. The coat had a name tag stitched on. Burns, the letters said. The sisters. Her heart checked itself because seeing a name is how the world reminds you people are real. She unrolled the coat on the deck. Inside were plastic document sleeves bound with a belt someone had cut from the coat's liner. She didn't want to open them. She wanted to carry them into the office and put them on her father's desk and light a candle. She wanted to leave the whole thing buried again. But wanting doesn't keep floods from coming, and it doesn't keep secrets from rotting. She slid a sleeve free and held it up to the light. The plastic had fogged a little, but the paper inside was crisp as a new appointment card. It was a photostat of a permit, a demolition permit, stamped for a mill on Pikes Bend Road. Demolition with a date from 5 years ago and a signature Nora recognized, the county commissioners, A man who'd been re-elected twice on a smile and a hat he wore like a joke he told on himself. Under the permit was a map. The map showed Cedar Glass, the river, the floodplain and soft crosshatch. Red circles had been inked by hand around the old mill, the cannery, 3 warehouses by the railroad, the bingo hall some folks loved and some folks feared because losing money is a thing you carry home in your pocket like a shame. Beside each circle, a date. Beside 2 of the dates, the word training. Noura's mouth went dry. She pulled more sleeves. Insurance valuations. Correspondence. Emails printed out with subject lines like coordination and community benefit and, in one case, a blunt, quicker if wet. A tab with the county seal open to nothing but a list of names. She recognized a few. One was the name on the missing poster on her office window. She felt the world rearrange itself around her as if someone had shifted a load of bricks on a truck and the balance had slid an inch toward tipping. She heard the heron on the door laughing at her through its painted beak, except of course the heron did not laugh. She told herself to breathe. She breathed. She reached back into the compartment and her fingers found metal. It was a key. Not a truck key. A key for a Knox box, the little steel safes mounted on public buildings so fire crews could get in fast without breaking doors. Knox shone in raised letters. On the shank, scratched with a nail or a spite, was a number, 104. Below it, stamped by a proper die, was another, 1, the kind of stamped one that meant master. There was a second key taped to the underside of the wooden panel she'd pried up. She saw it now because her hands had begun to shake and everything they touched wanted to be dropped. The second key had no marks. It was old brass, worn thin where a ring had worried it for years. She slid her nail under the tape and the key came loose like a tooth in a child's mouth. It was light and heavy both. The phone in the office rang. The sound jumped her skin. She climbed down from the truck and wiped her hands and made herself walk normal and picked up on the 3rd ring. Reddick Repair, she said, willing her voice to be the same voice it had always been, the one people brought their problems to because it would not laugh at them. Is this Noura? A man asked. He didn't introduce himself. It is. Someone told me you hauled a truck out of the fairgrounds. She watched sunlight crawl across the bay floor like a spill you could never mop fully. I did. It's county property. It was surrendered to the auction board. The board doesn't speak for the county. The board is the county when it comes to disposals. Her voice was still even. She didn't ask him how he knew. Phones grow ears when you say the wrong word in the wrong ear. There was a pause long enough for the caller to light a cigarette or swallow a temper. You find anything in it? She looked at her hands with their half-moons of grime and the smear of adhesive from the tape that had held the brass key. A mouse condo, she said. And a copy of the hazmat guide that belongs in a museum. Another pause. You planning to keep it? Depends on how she runs. She's a liability, Ms. Reddick. He said her name like he had to check a card for it, like it had been put in his mouth by someone else. Be careful you don't find yourself exposed. The line clicked dead before she could say that exposure is what happens when you stand in the sun and refuse to move. She set the receiver down very gently as if it were a live animal. Then she locked the office door, flipped the sign to closed, an act that felt less like a thing you do for lunch and more like a thing you do before you kneel, and went back to the truck. She pulled more from the compartment. A flash drive in a Ziploc, and inside the Ziploc, a note written on a receipt, "If I don't come back, take this to someone who remembers before the money." The script had a handwriting teacher's patience. Underneath it, a second line, "Don't trust the captain." The word captain had been underlined. In the bottom corner, the letter B. Burns. Which one? The older sister had always smiled with her whole face, no reserve. The younger had a backbone that could have been sold retail if spines were something you might buy in a store. They changed tires behind Noura's shop for a fundraiser once, 3 cars at a time, not a lug nut rounded all day. If one of them had written this, one of them had known what this truck held. One of them had wanted the world to know too. She found the turnout pants next. Then a helmet with the face shield cobra rolled with tape. On the crown, written in sharp black letters, were 2 words, White Ash. She frowned. White ash was a tree. It was also a phrase her father used about house fires when people talked about the color of what was left. It burns so hot, he would say, the ash comes down like surrendered snow. He would say it soft, apologizing to nobody everyone. She set the helmet down very carefully and didn't touch it again. Outside, the Cherokee's owner came for his keys and told her 3 things about the knock. She listened and nodded and smiled and took his money and told him come back tomorrow and she would put new bushings in, and he said a blessing on her head that felt like one of the old ones you earn by keeping a place open when the rest have folded. When he left, she closed the bay door halfway, throwing the truck in a long cool shade that made it look younger. She climbed into the cab and sat with her hands on her knees. She opened the glove box on a thought she could not explain, and it fell open to spill a county map and a pack of matches and a small black field notebook. The notebook felt heavier than it should have. She opened to the first page. Names. Dates. Addresses. Times. Rainfall measurements. A column labeled training in careful block letters. A shaded square beside a date 6 months ago with the words Captain said better TO practice in real conditions written in. Another page with the words Knox Master cut by county. And a question mark so sharp it could cut wire. Someone had been collecting their courage 1 line at a time, and the act of seeing it turned Noura's mouth to sand. She thought about taking it to the sheriff. She thought about the sheriff's brother-in-law, who was the mayor, which in a county like theirs was a man with a key to the good coffee and a habit of telling the same joke twice. She thought about the boy on the flyer. She thought about White Ash. Her father's rag was in the drawer by the sink. She took it out, smelled solvent and clove and a long ago Christmas where he'd had just enough cash to buy her a socket set second-hand and enough love to wrap it in paper 2 sizes too big. She wiped her hands until the black came off and the shaking went with it. Outside, a siren moaned, not from the truck but from the highway. She listened to it rise and fall and carry on, going somewhere else with its need. She turned the page of the notebook. On the last pages were photographs printed on cheap paper in grayscale. A warehouse interior. A line of pallets. A shop fan tipped on its side to push air. In the corner of one image, the corner of a boot. The sole had a triangular chunk missing near the heel, a shape odd enough to be a signature. In another photo, the same boot appeared in a reflection off steel. In the third, the figure to whom the boot belonged had been mostly cropped, but the forearm visible bore a tattoo of a heron's wing in a shiver of lines so delicate you had to lean to see them. The camera had been shy of faces and brave about everything else. "You didn't take this for yourself," Noura said, and her voice sounded like someone else's for a second, someone more certain. "You took this to be found." She copied the photographs with her phone. She texted them to nobody, because the act of sending is the act of entrusting a secret to the weather, but she needed them not to die if the papers did. She tucked the notebook in her backpack and slid the backpack under the floor mat of her pickup like a teenager hiding cigarettes. Then she climbed back onto the fire truck's rear step and reached into the compartment again. Her fingertips brushed something smooth, then something that bit her knuckle. She inhaled sharp and drew back a small cut beating red. She reached again with her other hand, slower, and found the edge of a metal box about the size of a shoe. It was painted black and the paint decade stubborn. A hasp held a padlock the size of a sorrow. Keys. The brass one in her pocket, the one that felt like an inheritance, did not fit. The Knox key was too generous a thing for this little lock. She looked around her shop at all the tools that were designed, in theory, for gentleness, prying, easing, coaxing. Then she took down the oldest pry bar, kissed its knuckle where the steel flared, and said, "Forgive me. I don't have time to be your better angel." The lock gave with the stubborn pop of a hinge decided. Inside the box were 3 things wrapped in oil paper. The first was a small flash drive twin to the one in the Ziploc but labeled in black marker with a date that corresponded to a storm last fall, the one that bent trees into the roads and filled basements with their own furniture. The second was a set of photographs on glossy paper, proper this time, each in a clear sleeve. The third was a ring, plain, flattened in one spot, as if a tire had rolled over it and kept going. Inside, an inscription, AJ to B. She held the ring like it might unlock something in the air between this moment and whatever it belonged to. She thought of the Burns sisters again and of an AJ, Arlen Jeffers, the retired captain everyone had called Steady until one day Steady became stubborn and he'd retired louder than he arrived. AJ could be somebody else. Somebody better. She tasted bitterness and told herself not to choose an enemy before she had to. Movement caught in the corner of her vision. Across the lot, at the edge of the grass, a heron stood in the drainage ditch, tall as a rumor, the blue-gray of old smoke. It flexed its neck and watched her with an eye that did not blink. The truck door's heron stared forward. The real bird stared at her. Then it lifted, wings creaking open like a barn door, and went. She put the ring back in the box because some things you carry are lighter under the weight of a lid. She slid the Knox key into her pocket where the brass key lay. Together they felt like two vowels waiting for a consonant to become a word. She worked until dusk. The Cherokee got its bushings. A lawnmower coughed into life. A battery tender sang its thin little song. The truck sat quiet except for the engine block giving off the last of its heat. The compartment, empty of the worst of its secrets, breathed cool under its plank. When she finally stepped outside, night had braided itself into the trees on the far side of the lot. The river was a darker darkness in the distance. Someone lit a barbecue 2 blocks over and the smoke twisted out a ribbon of hunger into the sky. Nura stretched her back and listened to the hum of the sodium street light overhead. Her phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number showed a heron emoji and nothing else. She stared at it until the little dots of a follow-up appeared and became words. You don't know me. I'm B's cousin. If you have what I think you have, meet me at the old cannery tonight. Park on the south side. No lights. She typed, who are you? Then added, who told you I had it? Dots again. Then, the captain doesn't speak for all of us. Come if you want him not to find you first. She looked up and the heron was gone and the streetlight hummed and the word captain sat in her mouth like a chip of something that had once been a tooth. She did 3 things without deliberating, loaded her father's old camera into her backpack, slid the flash drives into the bottom of her boot, and handwritten a note she left on the shop counter, back in a bit. Lock the door behind you. It made her snort, which helped. She drove with the radio off. White lines slid under the tires like old film. The cannery had been dead so long it had grown in its death, vines making sense of brick, windows hired by swallows, a tree taking root in the freight entrance as if it had signed a lease. The south side faced the river where a concrete apron fell away into water so slow you could convince yourself there was no current, only patience. She killed her lights a mile out and let the last of the day be what she could see by. Near the loading dock, she saw the shadow of a person detach from the deeper shadow of the wall. Taller than her. A hoodie. Hands out where she could see them in practical theater. She parked where the text had told her, walked with her hands easy at her sides the way you do when dogs aren't sure of you, and stopped where the light from town ended and the cannery night began. You're late, the person said. The voice was a woman's. Throat scratched, tired. Not late, Nura said. Careful. The woman pushed the hood back. Her hair was buzzed to the scalp, and there was a small tattoo behind her left ear, a triangle inside a triangle inside a triangle. I'm Ada, she said. My cousin is Beth Burns. B, Nura said. The letter from the receipt unfurled in her mind like paper opening. Ada nodded. She's gone. The word went through Nura like a bad current. Gone how? Gone, Ada said. They called it an accident. The kind that happens when you're the wrong kind of curious. Nura said nothing because the word accident has a way of moving in and asking for proof you can't give. You have her box, Ada said. Or something like it. You got to the truck. Nura felt the keys in her pocket without moving her hand. I have questions. Me too, Ada said. Most of them are the kind that get answers only when someone gets scared. The man you talked to today, he'll be out of scared by tomorrow. Tonight he's still planning. Planning people are lazy. They think time waits when they tell it to. It doesn't. You're very certain. It's cheaper than therapy. Ada's mouth quirked. Do you have a camera? Yes, Noura said. Good, Ada said. You're going to want it. She turned and walked toward a door that had been spayed with "Keep Out" in yellow paint so thin the brick bled through like the past will. Inside, the air was cooler, full of the smell of sweet rot and old cardboard. Their footfalls skated across pigeon dirt. The beam of Ada's phone sliced the dark into neat rectangles, then cut off as a red glow warmed in the far corner like a coal being breathed back alive. A generator hummed once, coughed, then took its breath. Lights strung on zip ties blinked awake, low wattage, funeral parlor bright. In their poor light a room resolved itself, work tables, a battered whiteboard, a map like the one in the notebook but older, yellowed, and covered in red thread. I know this is dramatic, Ada said, seeing Noura's face. But when people start dying, his people, ours, all of them, she shrugged. You learn to make your own light. Whose light was it before? Sane men who sold the dark, Ada said. Listen. She put a finger to her lips. At first all Noura heard was the generator and the river. Then another sound slid in, soft as someone untying their shoes, the creak and settle of the cannery itself, old wood complaining in weather it doesn't remember signing for. Then another sound, a car door sighing shut. Ada's eyes did not change. We're out of time. Who? Noura whispered. Captain Arlen, Ada said. And whoever he owes more than he fears. The room, the lights, the red thread map, swung nauseous in Noura's vision for 1 C6 second. Ada put a hand on her shoulder and it felt like a level placed on a board. You brought the key? Noura nodded. The Knox key sat in her pocket like a coin you weren't supposed to spend and now suddenly had to. Good, Ada said. Because what we need isn't on paper. She crossed to a steel locker in the far corner and knocked twice low, once high. The door swung open without a sound. Inside, a laptop waited on a shelf beside a box of risk assessment forms. Ada touched the laptop's spacebar and it woke, a login screen asking if they were sure they wanted to go on. It reads the key, Ada said, holding out her palm. Noura laid the Knox key on it. Ada slotted it into a USB scanner that had been wired in a way that would have made Noura's father sigh and smile because in this county ingenuity and stubbornness are synonyms. The laptop chimed, the login cleared. A desktop populated, folders named innocently, training_schedules, hydrant_pressures, drills_September, photos. Ada clicked photos. The screen filled with thumbnails, buildings Noura knew, nights she remembered by smell. The dates staggered like a drunk's forearm. Ada opened one. A pane of fire, orange so clean you wanted to baptize your face in it and come up speaking truth. The camera panned. Off to the left, a figure stood in silhouette. Forearm tattooed with a heron's wing. Pause, Ada said out loud, as if the laptop would obey. It did. She zoomed. The heron's wing shivered, lines like ripples in river sand. Noura felt the air go cold around her ears. The river gave one of its hollow knocks against the concrete outside, the sound it makes when it wants to remind the land who built what. On the screen, a second figure came into frame, stepping carefully across ash like a guest at a wedding they hadn't been invited to. The boots the second figure wore had a triangular notch gone out of the right heel. The same notch as in the printed photos. The same notch that looked like a puzzle piece missing from a picture you don't remember starting. A voice came from the doorway behind them, smooth and gentle as a knife laid flat. Close the laptop, it said. And turn around real slow. Noura did not need Ada's hand to steady her now, she went still the way a deer does, an old wild thing waking up in her body all at once. The generator throbbed. The river knocked. The lights threw one of the figure's shadows 15 feet long across the map. Arlen, Ada said, not turning. The words stayed in the air like a smell. I told you to leave this alone. The man stepped into the light. Age had arranged his face into something honorable from across a parade ground, but up close the lines were cut more by calculation than weather. He wore his old captain's jacket like a borrowed suit, collar open, no badge. On his forearm, ink caught. The heron's wing shivered when his muscles flexed. You made a choice, he said to Ada. You make it for her too? He pointed at Noura with the hand that did not hold the pistol. Noura looked at the gun and felt how her body wanted to go tall around her heart, to give it room. She kept her voice level. I make my own choices. Do you? He smiled. Then make a good one now. Hand over the key. Ada's shoulder dropped a fraction. Don't, she said to Noura without looking at her. He doesn't have a plan past this room. Arlen's smile widened. My plan is older than both of you, he said. Older than this building. Older than the river's last decision. People get what they vote for. Noura thought of the map in the truck, the red circles, the word training written in careful block letters across scenes that had ended with women in borrowed shoes standing in ashes and wondering whether ash counted as theft. She thought of the ring flattened in the box and the inscription AJ to B in the note, don't trust the captain. She lifted her hand toward her pocket. Arlen's gun did not waver. Outside, tires rolled on gravel. More doors shut. The generator hiccuped. Noura looked at the laptop screen and saw the paused frame, the heron wing tattoo, the boot with the missing notch, the field of fire that had taken the cannery's sister building and left the town with fewer places to make money that didn't own you. She looked at the man in front of her and saw, unnervingly, a kind of loneliness in his face that did not excuse anything and explain too much. You don't have to do this, she said. It was one of those sentences that makes you feel ridiculous even as you say it, like telling a tornado to mind its manners. Arlen's eyes flicked to the key between her fingers. Ada breathed in like a diver. A shout rose from the dark beyond the door, a voice Noura knew from meetings and fundraisers and kneeled prayers, a voice that had said her name at a ribbon cutting and then misremembered it until she stopped correcting him. Captain? The voice was close now. You need a hand? Arlen's mouth twitched toward a reply. Noura saw the split second where every choice he'd made leaned on the next one like stairs built in a hurry. She dropped the key. It hit the concrete and bounced once with a bell tone bright as the first note of a siren. The sound brought the men outside running. And then the generator died. The red thread room plunged into a dark so total that for a heartbeat it felt like drowning standing up. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. Up, Noura felt the black close over her like a hood pulled down by hands that didn't love her. The generator's death left a silence so thick it tasted metallic, a coin on the tongue. Outside, boots hammered gravel. Inside, the dark pressed, and the river knocked once more against the cannery wall as if to ask whether the land had learned anything yet. She didn't scream. The scream was a knot in her throat with teeth, but she let it dissolve because the old instincts waking in her body needed the air. Beside her, Ada's breath steadied, then moved. A palm found Noura's elbow, the briefest pressure, a compass touch. Left, Ada whispered, voice shaped to the inch. Handrail. Noura's fingers skimmed paint-chipped metal. She followed the rail down in a crouch, counting fast in the old, practical way, 1 flight, landing, 2nd flight, landing. The cannery's stairwell held a memory of light, sodium ghosts from the street bleeding under doors, a dime's edge of moon along an upper window. A door above banged open. Key. Arlen's voice, closer than it should have been. Find that damned key. Something scuffed on the concrete, men feeling for small, bright things with big boots. Ada tugged. They slid into a hallway quilted with damp, the air colder, the floor raw with grit that whispered under their feet. Noura's body counted doorways the way mechanics count clicks on a torque wrench, 3 to the wide one, 2 to the corner, 1 to the loading dock that had sighed all her childhood when men still brought home wages in envelopes. A rectangle of gray opened ahead. Night had returned as a kind of mercy. The south apron lay smooth and patient, the river beyond it mottled metal and ink. "Down," Ada said, and dropped to her belly. Noura mirrored her just as a flashlight sliced the wall where their heads had been. Dust drifted, luminous in the beam, then turned back to ordinary when the light moved on. They crawled. Ada's palm found a toolbox she must have stowed here before, metal on concrete, a soft clunk. She hauled it with her as if it weighed nothing. Outside, tires whispered, doors shut, men called to men by first names made into weapons. At the dock's lip, Ada angled right, and in the thin light Noura saw the steel ladder baked into the concrete, a descent to the low catwalk the workers had used when the river was generous and the loading cranes weren't tired. "Easy," Ada breathed. Noura's boots found rungs slick with algae. The river put its cold fingers around her ankles, then her shins. The catwalk took her weight with a sound like old breath. Ada came after, toolbox between her knees, one hand free. They flattened against the wall. Above, the dock's mouth framed a slice of sky and three silhouettes in different kinds of impatience. "Generator first," a man said. "Then the downstairs." Arlen answered with his old parade ground quiet. "Key's here somewhere." "Spread out." Ada leaned close enough that Noura felt the shape of the whisper more than the whisper itself. 50 yards, she said. "Left. Trestle. I've got a thing there." They moved sideways along the catwalk, hands on cold rail, bodies turned half to the river. The water slipped by as if it had an appointment elsewhere. In the dark it had the sound of a big animal thinking. The trestle's pylons loomed up, black on black, and Ada lifted the toolbox onto the catwalk and crouched over it. The latches sounded like bones. Inside, not wrenches but small, precise rebellions, a coil of coated wire, a roll of black tape, a battery pack, a magnet, a spool of fishing line, a tablet swaddled in a sweatshirt. "You build boats with that?" Noura whispered. "Better," Ada said. "Alibis." She pressed the battery pack's leads to the tablet's belly. The dark gave back a square of low red. The screen lit her face from below, cheekbones, resolve. She touched 3 places on the glass like they were rosary beads. A map blinked up, dots along the river, little notes labeled with dates and weather, a line that ran like a vein from the mill to the cannery to the warehouses. "Bees last week," Ada said, half to herself. "Every hour she could steal." She toggled. The map became a list, files, each named sober as a receipt, water_level_1, hydrant_pressures_lookout, training_actuals. "Can you pull them?" Noura asked. Ada nodded at the toolbox. "On 3 different cards. And in 2 places they'll never look. But the thing we need isn't digits." She pointed into the water. "You hear that?" At first, only the river. Then a deeper note under it, like a truck idling under floorboards. And in its breath a rhythm that was not a rhythm, a pulse that wasn't heart or machine but a negotiation. "Gate," Ada breathed. "By the pipe. County swore it was sealed. He kept it. Arlen. He kept it." The words slotted in Noura's mind like gears finding their rightful teeth. If the gate moved, water moved. If water moved, basements filled, or stayed empty, on someone's say-so. "He?" Noura said, and hated how her voice wanted to shake. Ada didn't answer. She slung the toolbox onto her back with a length of line like a backpack strap. "Come on," she said. "Before the dark remembers we owe it." They slid along the catwalk till a concrete outcrop shouldered the river. There, flush with the wall, a round plate the size of a manhole cover lay pinned under a tangle of iron. Ada crouched, fingers nimble. Tape, wire, magnet, she made a little animal out of them and stuck it to the iron plate, then touched the tablet again. The red light winked into a softer red, then green. Metal murmured. Down in the river, a chain settled like a spine remembering posture. "Evidence," Ada whispered. "If we live long enough to use it." Boots thudded above, then the gulp and cough of the generator rolling over as men restarted it by muscle and habit. Light poured down the doc's mouth, thin, jaundiced, enough to make the catwalk a stage if anyone looked down. Ada's hand found Noura's sleeve. "Now," she said. "Back." They slid into the shadow under the dock as the generator found its breath. Light bled across the river's skin. The cannery's windows glowed like teeth. At the ladder, they froze. A shape blocked the square of the loading dock, legs apart, gun at hip. Arlen. He stood in the way men stand when every story they've told about themselves hangs in the air like a coat on a hook. "Where?" he said to the darkness. Not a question to the room, but to himself. "Where would I hide, if I were them?" Ada leaned into Noura's ear. "Left," she breathed. "Drain." They took the catwalk slip and stepped into the river up to the knees. Cold lifted the breath out of Noura's chest and set it white in front of her. Ada's palm landed on a grill half-clogged with leaves. Together they pulled. The metal grated, a small scream. Light above shifted. A man peered over. "Boss," he called. "Movement." Ada cursed without voice and slid into the black water below the grill. "Air pocket," she hissed. "It's a culvert." Noura didn't give herself time to think. She pushed through behind Ada, shoulders scraping brick, the river's cold trying to turn her into a story about caution. Inside, the culvert was a metal throat. It stank of old wet and new silt. Above, boots hammered. "Shut that grate!" Arlen barked. Metal clanged home. The world on the other side of the grill became someone else's problem. Inside, the culvert carried them 3 body lengths into a low room where the water shallowed to a puddle and the air tasted of mice and talc. Ada hauled herself up by a rung set into a wall. Noura followed, shaking river from her hands. "Backstairs," Ada panted. "Then up to the office. There's another way out. If he hasn't remembered it." "He will," Noura said. "Then we'll see if his memory can climb a fence." They moved. The maintenance corridor smelled like electricians' ghosts. Up a flight so steep it would have been a ladder in a different building. A door that stuck and then gave as if it had decided to forgive them. An office with a desk built into the wall, a calendar 3 years old, a mug of pens turned into a mausoleum of dried ink. Ada crossed to a filing cabinet and stabbed 2 fingers into the slot above the top drawer. The cabinet slid aside 6 inches on a track no inspector would have blessed. Behind it, a rectangle just larger than a person breathed cold. Through. Ada pushed. Noura went. Her shoulder brushed brick. The cold smelled clean, like the inside of a new washer hose. They came out behind a stack of pallets in a disused yard fenced with chain link made sullen with time. Across the yard, the South Street cut by, empty as a thought you meant to have later. Ada touched the fence with a flat of her hand, then stuck the magnet from her pocket to the post. Somewhere inside the steel, a mechanism clicked. The stretch of fence bowed, then swung outward like a door with stage fright. "Your alibis have hinges," Noura said, astonished in spite of herself. Ada's mouth made a shape that might be a smile in daylight. "Bees," she said. She liked doors more than walls. They slipped through. The fence kissed shut behind them, chain sighing. On the street, ordinary Tuesday night ticked its cheap watch, an engine a dozen blocks down, a TV through someone's curtains, a woman telling a dog that the night was not for barking. They ran crouched between shadows to the pickup where Noura had left it, door unlocked because locks are a promise you make to yourself. Inside, she fished under the floor mat for the backpack with the notebook in the drives. Her hands shook now. The shake came late, like weather. "Keys," Ada said. "Drive." They rolled quiet, lights off the first block, then on. In the mirror, the cannery's windows looked like watchful eyes. Noura took Pike's Bend, then downriver, then the old county road that paralleled the water and sometimes forgot to be a road. "Where?" she asked. "Your shop," Ada said. "We can't keep moving and carry all this. We need to fix the problem where it started." She tapped the dash. "With the truck." "The truck?" "You fixed it. We'll need its pump." For what? Ada looked at her and the look said, to answer a question with the only thing that counts. To force a choice, she said. Tonight they want a wet rehearsal. We'll make it their last. They said nothing else until the Reddick sign swung into view. Noura nosed the pickup in and killed the lights and felt the kind of relief you feel when the place you keep your life looks back at you and says, "Fine, let's try again." Inside the shop, the truck waited broad and red and steady, an animal that had heard the story unfolding and had decided to listen till the end. Noura's boots ticked on concrete as she crossed to it. She palmed the fender. "We're going out," she told it and heard how stupid that sounded and didn't care. Machines answer how they can. Ada had the bay door half up before Noura could ask. "Fuel?" Ada said. "Half tank," Noura said. "Enough to buy trouble." "Hose?" "2 good lengths if they'll unstick." "Fittings?" "Lucky." She tapped a drawer with her foot. Everything they forgot when they cut the grant. They worked without wasting names for what they were doing. The pump primed with reluctance and then fervor. Hose pulled free with a rip of old canvas surrendering glued on dust. The engine took its breath and held it steady. Ada found a radio in the glove box that still kept secrets. Static hushed, then a voice bloomed thinly, "Dispatch on training channel. All units confirm." "Listen," Ada said. A call and response built itself, units by numbers, not names, the way men talk when they want to be both seen and not seen. In between, in the bleed of the scanner frequencies, an unguarded sentence, "Captain wants the gate at the mill exercised at 2200. "Exercised," Ada repeated. "Like a dog." "Or a sin," Noura said. "Mill first," Ada decided. "Then the warehouse. They'll raise water to make a show, then claim surprise when it climbs the last 2 steps." She looked at the pump panel. "We'll be there first. We'll make them work for it." Noura put the truck in gear. The bay door rolled up the rest of the way like a curtain. The truck's headlamps swept the lot, catching the missing person flyer on the office window. The boy's face watched them go. "Paxton," Ada said, as if the name were a road sign. "He worked nights at the mill. Last seen the storm week." "I know," Noura said. The name made a place behind her ribs go hollow. They rolled out with the engine's base building the street's chest. The town looked smaller through the truck's flat windshield, more toy than trouble. Street by street, it let them pass as if it, too, recognized the heron on the door and wanted to see where it would fly. At the mill, the road fell toward the river. On the far side of the floodgate, water lipped stone. A figure hunched by the mechanism, wrench in hand, cigarette fire painting his cheek red between drags. Another figure with a flashlight paced slow as if you were thinking big thoughts about little matters. "Lights off," Ada said. Noura killed them and coasted the last 30 yards, the truck huge and improbable in the dark like a whale in a culvert. Ada lifted a hand and a third figure detached from a deeper pocket of black and came near, head down. When he spoke, his voice was young and careful. "Ada?" She exhaled something that was almost relief and almost grief. "Evan," she said. "I told you never to come." "Then I didn't," he said, and his mouth tried to be brave. "I'm only imagining this." "Who's with Arlen?" Ada asked. "2 from maintenance. 1 from the council," Evan said. "He keeps looking at his shoes like he wants them to walk him home." He peered up at the truck like a kid who'd found a cassowary in the backyard. "You fixed her?" "She fixed herself," Ada said, and in the cab Noura smiled at the lie that was also true. Evan's voice lowered. "They called it a drill. But drills have checklists." "He has instructions." "From?" Ada asked. Evan's eyes moved toward the town as if the person he meant could hear names the way dogs hear mail trucks. "Upstairs," he said. "Where it's always dry." "Go home," Ada said. "I can't," he said. "I'm on the roster." "Then vanish. When your name's called, be smoke." Braver men have failed to obey gentler commands. Evan looked again at the truck as if it might carry a better version of himself in its hose bed. He nodded and became part of the dark until he wasn't visible to anyone who wasn't looking for him. Ada slapped the side of the truck. "Here," she said to Noura. "Back down to that hydrant. We'll draft if the river's low, but better to feed the pump clean." Noura eased the rig into position like a dance she had watched enough times to know where the steps go. Ada spun the steamer cap and the hydrant threads showed their old red. The wrench bit and the street sang thin as the valve opened. Water hit the hose with a body's rush. The pump took it and made it more, pressure climbed like a nerve finding its voice. "Ready," Ada said. "On my mark, we put a line across the floodgate. When he lifts it, he lifts us. If he wants to flood the street, he'll have to fight fire head-on. How is that not ridiculous?" Noura asked, half smiling, half terrified. Ada's eyes were wild and lucid both. Everything is ridiculous until it isn't. A flashlight cut the dark by the floodgate. A man raised his wrench for show, then turned it for real. The gate shuddered. Water nosed up, eager and stupid. Noura's hands remembered what she hadn't been taught: crack the nozzle, feel the line stiffen, lean into it like a farmer into wind, become part of the tilt and not the object of it. In the beam's stray light, Ada looked like a swimmer about to dive into something nobody was sure was water. "Now," Ada said, and they opened up. The line leapt and the nozzle's fog patterns spread in a bright, breathy wall. Water fell on water, the gate fought a new river crossing it, the men by the mechanism shouted meaningless orders at physics. The spray haloed into rain and fell back, the flood's first surge sleepy-eyed became a stutter and then a sulk. "What are you doing?" the councilman yelled, "Shoes forgotten." "Putting out your exercise," Ada called, pleasant. "Stand down," Arlen commanded. "Stand up," Ada suggested. "And be seen." He stepped closer and in the truck's marker lights Noura saw the tattoo flecks. The heron's wing lifted and fell with his pulse. He was handsome in the way statues are, form correct when motion stops. "You have no authority." Ada adjusted the stream, pencil now, whipping force at the gate's seam. "That sentence is a door I stopped walking through," she said. "I have a key. I have eyes. I have a cousin who wrote down everything you didn't want to remember." Arlen's face sharpened. Beth was out of her depth. "She could swim," Ada said. "You kept moving the river." A shadow peeled from shadow. A fourth man had arrived. He wore a hat, and Noura remembered the hat before she remembered the smile, the commissioner's, cut with a blade of charm. He smoothed his tie as if the night were a mirror. "Ladies," he said, "this is a training environment. You're endangering public works." "No," Ada said. "You are." She nodded at Noura. "Give him something to remember." Noura feathered the bale, the pencil stream carved a white roar in the night and struck the commissioner square in the chest. He staggered backward, hat making an argument with gravity before choosing to be wrong. He fell into the wet with a sound like punctuation. When he sat up, he had become a story nobody had intended to tell. The maintenance men gaped. One laughed, the small, surprised, disloyal laugh that means a wall just learned it is drywall and not load-bearing. Arlen took one step toward Ada and stopped as the nozzle swept near his knee. "You will regret this," he said to the night generally, but his eyes found Noura. "Already do," she said. "And not for the reasons you think." Sirens wound up far off and near. Real ones, dispatched on real channels, because someone's grandma had seen lights where there shouldn't be and called a number she trusted. The training net crackled. "Unit 2, report." "Unit 4? Captain?" Arlen lifted a hand to his radio, then let it fall. For a second his face opened and the person behind the rank looked out, tired and stubborn and afraid of the right thing. Then the door shut. "We're done," he said to his men, voice back to parade. "Shut it down." "Leave it up," Ada said. "Leave it where everyone can see it." The commissioner stood, hat dripping down the bridge of his nose. "You think anyone will understand what they're looking at?" he asked. "You think anybody cares how the water got where it went? They care about their insurance checks. They care about going viral. They care about Paxton Reed, Noura said. The man blinked. Who? The kid who worked nights, she said. The one your talking points don't cover. Something in Arlen's face moved. Not much. Enough. Ada let the line fall to a heavy hiss at their feet. We have his ring, she said softly, and the knight took the sentence and made it bigger. We have footage. We have logs. We have names on paper in someone else's handwriting. And we have a key you lost because you thought a flood only takes what you tell it to. They all heard the fire engines before they saw them, old sevens with the paint polished by bake sales, brakes singing high as the trucks turned down the mill road. The first volunteer out of the cab was a woman with shoulders like a pillar and a face like your neighbor the day your dog died. She took in the scene in one slow blink. Her eyes came to rest on the heron on the door of the rig Noura stood on. Cedar glass, she said. Where'd you pick her up? Fairgrounds, Noura said. The woman nodded once. We thought she was gone, she said. Good to see an old friend making trouble. She looked at Arlen next. Evening, Captain, she said, polite as a blade in a cloth. You want to tell me why the gate's up on a clear night? Training, he said. She nodded at Ada's line, steady now like a leash on a patient animal. Looks like somebody's training back. More trucks. More volunteers. Faces Noura knew not by name but by the way they stood when they were going to do what was necessary no matter who asked them not to. The commissioner found his smile again and got half a sentence out before a volunteer with a clipboard asked him to initial a form. He did, reflex and culture stronger than pride. The night bled down from emergency to paperwork. The gate stayed half up, water shouldering through like a drunk in a doorway, muttering. Phones gathered evidence with the lazy certainty of people who have once been told no and decided to remember all the times they didn't have to accept it. Ada leaned on the truck step and let herself breathe. Noura's shoulders discovered they had been holding the sky up and gave it back to the sky. Warehouse next, Ada said finally. Noura stared at her. You're not serious. Dead serious, Ada said. They'll move there if this didn't go their way. People live downriver. They'll need the show. Noura looked at the cluster of volunteers, the forms, the commissioner's hat making a sad half-moon on the asphalt where he'd left it. We won't be too lucky twice, she said. No, Ada said. We'll be right faster. They left the gate to the custody of better hands and rolled the truck toward the warehouses. The river paced them on their right like a big dog newly leashed, excited and embarrassed. On the second block, a car tucked out behind them and followed too long. Noura watched it in the mirror without moving her head. The headlights blinked once, then twice, the pattern men use when they mean to tell each other what they think they already know. Company, she murmured. Ada checked the mirror and smiled without humor. That's upstairs, she said. They don't like when downstairs plants lights. Let them watch, Noura said. We're not hiding. Her hands found the wheel's sweet spots and held them. At the warehouse block, they killed the headlights early and came in from the side street, the way a wind moves around a house before it knocks. Two figures stood by a door that should have been locked. One smoked. One tapped his phone as if the screen could grow a conscience. Across the lot, a pickup idled with the patience of a paycheck. Same pattern, Ada said, almost to herself. They always reuse success until it isn't. She tapped the radio, changed channels until a voice that didn't mean to be heard leaked through. Get the B-roll first. Then we'll cue the gate. The B-roll, Noura repeated, as if naming it might make it die. Ada opened her door. I'll talk, she said. You back me with pressure. They didn't creep. Sometimes not creeping is camouflage. They walked in like they had every right, because for one long second, maybe they did. Evening, Ada said to the smokers. You boys lost? One blinked. The other grinned in that way men grin when they think a woman is making the first move in a script they didn't write but believe they're directing. Just keeping the lights on. Good, Ada said. Then you can do the same for the hydrants that haven't been flushed in 2 years. We're going to put water where it wants to go. He laughed the careful laugh of someone who has a boss within earshot. That's not how it's gonna go. Tonight, Ada said, everything goes how it never used to. She nodded past them to the door. Open it. They didn't. She didn't push. She turned to the truck. Charge the line, she said, and the way she said it made it into a sentence most men obey. Noura spun the valve. The line went from limp to sex to work in one breath. Ada took the nozzle and wrote her name on the night in water. The smokers jumped back, hands up, cigarettes voiceless. The pickup across the lot clicked into gear and tried to leave, but the second engine in the alley blocked it like a cow in a gate. Stop, a voice called, and it was Arlen's, tired now, the long day having found him. Enough. Ada held the stream steady on the door seam until the old would thought it was weather. No, she said. This is the part where we choose the kind of town we are. The door gave. Inside, pallets made neat aisles of combustible arithmetic. A camera on a tripod watched a fan watch a rag watch a spark that hadn't been asked for yet. Ada swept the stream across the floor in a line that became a demand. Men cursed as their arrangements surrendered to physics. Turn it all off, Arlen said to the room that had become theater. He wasn't looking at Ada now. He was looking at the man by the truck, the one who had followed them from the mill, the one with the commissioner's haircut and a cheaper suit. You don't give orders here, the man said. Not anymore. Then who does? Ada asked. If it's not the people who bleed when you perform? The cheaper suit looked at Arlen, then at his phone, the consult of a believer. We proceed, he said. Training will demonstrate readiness. Training will demonstrate appetite, Ada said. She shifted the stream and the fan died under it. The camera fell and gave up a small, perfect sound as its lens cracked. And we are out of appetite. Sirens again, closer, as if they were learning the route. A volunteer engine turned the corner and its crew stepped down with all the gravity of people who had decided, on the way over, to be the adults. The woman with pillar shoulders saw Arlen and gave the briefest of nods that held both history and verdict. Captain, she said. Step aside. He did. It looked like a man taking off a badge, even if his jacket said he hadn't worn one in a while. Who called this drill? She asked. Because the forms don't match the night. Nobody answered. The commissioner's haircut and the cheaper suit put a hand on his phone like a man swearing an oath to the wrong book. Ada folded the line and let the pressure bleed. Noura throttled down the pump. For a second the block was quiet enough to hear the river speak in its sleep. Do you have Paxton's name in your paperwork? Noura asked the air. Do you have his hours? His last location? Or do you only keep the names of the men with hats? Eyes turned. Something uncomfortable walked the length of the lot and sat down in everyone's lungs. We have his ring, Ada said again, soft, not for performance now but for church. We know where it was flattened. We know when. We know what gate was open that night and who had the key. She looked at Arlen. We know what your tattoo looks like in firelight. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the rank had left and the person remained. I kept the gate because the river is a liar, he said. Because the county took our budget and left us promises. Because the volunteers got old. Because people kept moving into the floodplain and then calling me when the water remembered them. Because I thought if I controlled one thing, the big thing would forget to eat us. And because it was easy, Ada said. Easier than telling the truth and losing elections you don't even run in. He flinched. I told Beth to stop, he said. I didn't, he looked at his hands like they'd written letters he couldn't read. I didn't mean. Meaning is for poets, Ada said. You had a key. He nodded. The motion cost him. I'll show you where I dropped it, he said. And who handed me the next one? The cheaper suit took a step backward, and then another, and then found the bumper of the volunteer engine with his knees. The woman with pillar shoulders didn't touch him. She just looked at him as if she had come to clean a house and found a dead possum under the sink, and now she knew where the smell had begun. "Enough," she said, not to him alone. "We're done pretending paperwork is weather." The rest of the night unspooled like a hose that had been sitting kinked in the sun too long. Statements. Boxes. A line of volunteers waiting their turn at honesty. Arlen talking in a low, flat voice that had more confession in it than it wanted to and less than it owed. The commissioner arriving in a better suit, then leaving in a worse mood. Cameras honest for once, because the people holding them were not paid by anyone who would ever wear that hat. When the sky began to pale like a bruise thinking about forgiveness, Ada and Nura walked back to the truck. The heron on the door watched the horizon as if rehearsing dawn. Nura's hands found the steering wheel and stayed. She had not realized until she tried to let go how much she had been holding. "Beth," she asked finally. "How did it happen?" Ada stared at the warehouse roofline until it turned into birds. She thought Arlen would choose differently if he could see it from the outside, she said. So she showed him. He didn't. The river did what it was told. The door didn't open. The fan fell. All the ordinary things happened. And Paxton? Ada's mouth became a straight line that might have been a road if you were far enough away. "We'll bring him home," she said. "Now that the gate is a witness." They drove the truck back to the shop at a pace that let the town recognize itself block by block. People were out early, eyes swollen, coffee steaming from the mouth of cups. Some waved. Some didn't. A kid on a bike saluted and almost fell in a pothole and saved it with the panic-struck grace that keeps cities alive. At the shop, they killed the engine. The quiet that followed wasn't empty, it was the kind that makes a place taller. Ada slid down from the step and put her palm flat on the fender as if to take a pulse. "You woke her up," she said. "Now she's going to have opinions." "About what?" Nura asked. "About work," Ada said. "About the difference between saving and performing." The office door opened and Mrs. Voigt came in like weather you were glad for. Her cheeks were red, her hair held back with the competence of women who have never not gotten it done. "I saw," she said. "Everyone saw." She reached across the counter and squeezed Nura's hand hard enough to make the bones remember being young. "Paxton's mama wants to say your name out loud beside candles. You come tonight." "I will," Nura said. "And you," Mrs. Voigt said to Ada, who stood the way women stand when they've just used up the savings they keep in their spine. "You look like trouble that pays out. Eat this." She pressed a foil-wrapped something into Ada's palm that turned out to be a biscuit with a right to vote. Ada held it as if it were an award. "Yes, ma'am," she said. When the door shut, the shop breathed again. The fire truck clicked and softened. Nura leaned her back against the fender. The keys in her pocket, the brass, the knocks, felt less like weight, more like verbs. "You going to keep it?" Ada asked, nodding at the truck. "I think it kept me," Nura said. "Now we'll see if we can keep anyone else." Ada's smile was a spare thing that made more light than it used. "We'll need a place to put everything Beth took notes on," she said. "A place the county can't call a drawer and forget." "My father had a rule," Nura said. "If it fits under the bench, it's not solved. We'll put it on the wall." They were still standing like that, two women who had slept in their shoes awake enough to write policy, when a car with two new plates pulled into the lot and parked badly across two spaces. A man got out, the kind of man who believes time is a thing he can bend by raising his chin a quarter inch. He held a folded newspaper like a warrant. "Ms. Reddick," he said. "I'm with the state." "I doubt that," she said mildly. He blinked. "We're opening an inquiry. You'll surrender the truck pending evaluation." He set the folded paper on the counter. It was that morning's front page. The photograph showed Arlen at the mill gate, the water making a white barber's stripe across his knees. The headline read, "Training Exercise Doused." Subhead, "Volunteers question timing." The caption spelled her name wrong. "Evaluation," Ada said. "That what you call someone else's conscience?" He ignored her. He had the practiced blindness of hired men. "Keys," he said to Noura. Noura took them out of her pocket and weighed them in her palm. There were more now than there had been: truck, shop, knocks, brass. "This truck was abandoned," she said. "I resurrected it. I have a bill of sale." "The board can't sell what the county owns," he said. "The board is the county when it comes to disposals," she said, and felt a strange joy in giving his sentence back to him like a dog bringing the right stick. He frowned. "Don't make this harder." Ada stepped forward. "We will always make it harder," she said. "That's the point." He decided then to look at her and immediately decided to look away, as if the biscuit in her hand had burned the part of him that kept score. He reached for the folded paper as if it were proof of adultness. "There are processes," he said. "Yes," Noura said. "There are." She took a pen and wrote across the headline in neat block letters, "You do not get to bury this." She slid the paper back. "I'll bring the truck to your office when I'm done using it to keep the river honest." "You can't," he started, but his phone decided his attention belonged to someone more important. He turned away and left his sentence unfinished. He made 3 calls he wouldn't admit to and then got in his car and drove away, not looking at how small it was next to the truck. Ada watched him go. "He'll be back with a different hat," she said. "We'll be here with the same keys," Noura said. They slept in shifts for a day in the shop's back room like firefighters who weren't and were. In the afternoon, a boy on a scooter delivered sandwiches with a note that read, "From everyone who can breathe." In the evening, they walked to the vigil by the river and said Paxton's name with people who had said it before and would go on saying it until the world understood it wasn't done. When the vigil thinned to the people who do the carrying after the candles go cold, Arlen found them. He didn't wear the jacket. He didn't wear a hat. He looked like a man trying to figure out how much of himself to take to the dump and how much to salvage. "I found your missing notch," he said to Noura without preamble. "On a shelf in my garage. Thought it was funny once. Kept the boot like a trophy." He looked at the river. "Now I think I kept it so I couldn't pretend to forget." "Bring it tomorrow," Ada said. "We'll put it on the wall under the word evidence." He nodded. "I wrote a letter," he said. "To Paxton's mother. I don't know what it says yet." "Start with his name," Noura said. "Say it until the paper knows it." The next morning, the county came with forms and new men in old suits. The morning after, a state truck came with equipment and a woman who did not smile and asked better questions. The morning after that, the board posted a notice reinstating the Cedar Glass Volunteer Company's engine and authorizing emergency funds that smelled like election season. Through it all, the fire truck lived at the shop and rolled when called, 2 hydrant flushes that were not theatrics, 1 backyard shed because lightning doesn't read budgets, 1 medical assist where the heron on the door made a child in pajamas stop crying long enough to take a breath that didn't rattle. On the 4th morning, a letter arrived addressed to Noura, the handwriting careful and old-fashioned. Inside was a thank you on county letterhead signed by nobody and a photo printed on cheap paper, the 1997 Cedar Glass crew in front of the truck when red was still red. The Burns sisters stood shoulder to shoulder, their smiles the same size as their spines. On the back, a line in blue ink, "Find the white ash." She looked at Ada. Ada looked back and did not need to ask. They took the truck upriver to the trestle where Ada had made the little animal out of wire and magnet. Below the pylon, where the current eddied as if the river kept a jewelry box there, white ash had settled in a moon of pale dust on the black stones. The current lifted it and let it fall, lifted it and let it fall, a slow, patient breathing. Ada knelt. Her fingers found something under the pail. She lifted it free. A ring, flattened once and then reshaped by water's version of love. Inside, scratched faintly, 2 letters almost gone P. R. "Paxton Reed," Ada said. "We'll take you home." They did. Arlen and the volunteer woman and half the town waited with them, pants rolled, shoes drowned, dignity left on the bank and collected later. The river, having been asked properly at last, let go what it could. Not all of him. Enough that names could be said over something other than paper. After, in the quiet that follows a right thing, Noura sat on the truck step and watched the river not pretend. Ada sat beside her, knees muddy, biscuit crumbs on her sleeve from a fresh foil-wrapped Mercy. "What now?" Ada asked. "Now we stay awake," Noura said. "When they bring forms, we read the small type. When someone says training, we ask who benefits. When the gate squeaks, we ask whose hand is on the wheel." Ada nodded. "Beth would have liked you," she said. "You fix what tries not to be fixed." "She would have liked that you don't ask permission from men with hats," Noura said. They laughed soft the way tired women laugh when they aren't tired enough to forget why they're here. Sun burned the last of the fog up off the water. The heron came and stood in the shallows as if to sign the ledger. It watched them like a clerk who has seen everything and is willing to be surprised once more. Back at the shop, a small crowd had gathered to bring casseroles as if catastrophe were a death in the family and you fed it. Noura let herself be hugged until her shoulder throbbed where a bruise she hadn't admitted to had flowered. The missing person flyer had been taken down. In its place was a note written in a hand that trembled and refused to stop, "Thank you for saying his name." By afternoon, the day turned ordinary the way days do when you aren't looking. A mower wouldn't start. A boy needed a chain tightened on a bike. A woman wanted to know if she could buy the old siren off the truck for her bar if it didn't work anymore. Noura told her maybe someday. They were closing the bay when a shadow fell across the threshold. Not a man with a hat. Not the state. A boy with a buzz cut and eyes like the river when it's low. Evan. He held out a small cardstock envelope. Inside was an old Polaroid, colors gone to the warm side of memory, the mill yard, daylight, men in shirt sleeves, Arlen younger by half, Beth in the corner of the frame with her face turned sideways like she'd been laughing. On the back, someone had written in pencil, "Better to practice on something that doesn't feel." Evan's voice shook, and not just because he was young. "I found it in a locker nobody opens," he said. "I think it's what started the idea." "Thank you," Ada said. He swallowed. "Am I in trouble?" "Only if you stop," Noura said. "Only if you decide your name doesn't belong on the wall beside the others." He stood straighter on the spot. "Then I'll bring more." When he left, the light did that thing evening light does when fall is considering its options, amber at the edges, honest in the middle. Ada stretched her back till it popped and groaned happily at the betrayal of her bones. "You going to repaint her?" she asked, nodding at the truck. Noura looked at the sun-faded red, the pitted chrome, the blue heron still glossy-eyed. "No," she said. "I like that everyone can see where she's been." Ada grinned. "And the county can see where she's going." They stood a long time like that, melted ice in paper cups, the smell of hot rubber in Old River and somebody somewhere making chili poorly. It felt like the ending of something that had already become a beginning while they were busy surviving it. It was Noura who saw the envelope first, tucked under the wiper on her pickup, plain, the way threats dress for church. She slid it free. Inside, a single sheet, expensive paper, the letter had a name that rhymed with re-election. The message was 9 words long and more dangerous than any budget. "You won't always be there to turn the valve." Ada read it over her shoulder and did not bother to swear. She folded the paper once, twice, then slid it into the pocket where she kept the tablet and the magnet and the wire. "Stay mad," she said. "Stay funny. Stay public." "Stay," Noura echoed, and looked at the truck, the heron, the map on the office wall already blooming with thread. "We will." That night, as the town slept toward brave or didn't, Noura lay on the cot in the back room and listened to the metal settle, the truck cooling, the bay door sighing, the river knocking the way rivers do when they have something left to say. She pictured the keys curve in her palm, the stamped one, the scratched 104, the brass tooth her father would have filed just a hair so it slipped sweeter. She pictured Paxton's letters inside the ring and Beth's handwriting wrapping the flash drive and the heron lifting off the drainage ditch like a signature. And she pictured Arlen, not in uniform, head bowed, writing the first sentence of a letter with the word "dear" shaped like a gate lifting, letting through what had been stuck behind it too long. She slept. She dreamed she was under the cannery again, water cool to her ribs, hand on a ladder rung slick with time. When she woke, Ada was already at the desk, hair mussed, pen moving, mapping what they would do when the next form arrived with its pretty words. "What's our job today?" Noura asked, morning making her voice gravel and hope. "Same as yesterday," Ada said. "Make it harder." Noura rubbed her shoulder, smiled, and looked at the truck as the light made the old red brave again. "All right," she said to it. "Let's go give the county something honest to use." Across the lot, a long black sedan turned the corner and idled. The window rolled down an inch and rolled up again as if someone had just decided whether to be bold now or later. The sedan pulled away slow, the kind of slow that photographs. Ada followed the movement with her eyes and then looked at Noura. "We've got about an hour." "For what?" "To move the copy somewhere even braver than us," Ada said. "To hand the key to hands that can't be bought. To make it so that when the next letter comes, it won't matter who's standing at the valve." Noura nodded and picked up the backpack with the drives and the notebook. It felt lighter than the first night and heavier than any lie. She palmed the keys, felt the teeth, and turned toward the door with the kind of calm you only get after you've decided not to go back to being the person who apologizes to floods. The bay door climbed. Morning widened. The heron on the door looked forward. Somewhere behind them, a floorboard creaked, the ordinary kind of creak that belongs to old buildings and also to intentions sneaking up on themselves. Noura lifted her chin toward the noise and smiled a private, flinty smile that machines might understand. "All right," she said. "If you want the valve, come see what it costs. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications."